Bryan Kohberger's name sent shockwaves through a quiet college town, but now it is the families of the victims who fight a new battle suing to stop the release of graphic crime scene photos that threaten to turn their deepest grief into public spectacle. The small town of Moscow, Idaho, was never the kind of place people associated with violence. Tucked away in the Pacific Northwest, it was known more for its university life and quiet neighborhoods than for crime. That peace shattered the moment 4 young students were found brutally murdered inside an off-campus house. The scene was unlike anything local investigators had ever faced. Rooms were marked with signs of struggle, and the violence left behind evidence of rage and precision. News of the killings spread quickly, and within days, the entire nation was watching. The community grieved in silence while law enforcement raced against time to find answers. What unsettled people the most was the thought that someone capable of such horror might still be moving freely among them. Fear crept into every corner of the small town as doors were locked earlier than usual, and parents kept their children closer. When Bryan Kohberger, a criminology graduate student from a nearby university, was arrested, shock swept through both campuses. He was someone who had studied crime, written papers on criminal behavior, and appeared obsessed with how killers think. Detectives believed they had their man, pointing to cell phone records placing him near the scene. DNA left behind on a knife sheath, and surveillance footage of a car eerily similar to his circling the neighborhood on the night of the murders. The story seemed clear, but as often happens in cases this dark, new complications arose. While many were relieved to see an arrest, others whispered doubts. Unsettled by how the investigation had unfolded and how much about the suspect still remained unknown. As the case pushed forward, the details of the crime scene became a source of curiosity for outsiders. Reporters, bloggers, and online investigators dug through every scrap of information, hoping to piece together what had happened inside the house on that November night. What began as news reporting soon took on a more disturbing shape as whispers began that graphic photos of the crime scene were circulating online. Families of the victims, already shattered by loss, now faced the possibility that their loved ones' final moments were being shared with strangers. The investigation had already uncovered enough horror, yet the release of these images threatened to deepen the wounds. For the families, the tragedy was no longer just about losing their children, it was about protecting their memory from being turned into a spectacle. The lawsuits began when the families realized just how far the leaked photos had traveled. At first, they thought it was nothing more than online rumors, exaggerated by people eager for attention. But soon, screenshots appeared on forums, followed by entire albums of images being traded among strangers. Some of the photos revealed corners of the house splattered in blood, others showed rooms overturned as though frozen in chaos. For the parents, siblings, and friends of the victims, the sight was unbearable. Their private grief was now being dissected by thousands of eyes, many of whom treated the images as entertainment. Lawyers working with the families quickly filed emergency motions in court, demanding that the release of any further crime scene photos be stopped immediately. Their argument was simple: the victims had already lost their lives, and allowing their final moments to be exploited would add another layer of cruelty to the tragedy. The courtroom became an extension of the battle for dignity. Legal teams argued that the unauthorized circulation of evidence not only disrespected the victims, but also risked undermining the upcoming trial. If jurors were exposed to the photos online, it could bias their opinions and give the defense grounds to challenge the fairness of the proceedings. Prosecutors echoed the family's concerns, warning that the integrity of the case was at stake. For a trial already under intense public scrutiny, the appearance of leaked evidence was more than a nuisance, it was a direct threat to justice. The families sat quietly in the courtroom, their grief visible in every gesture, as their attorneys fought to shield them from further harm. Outside the courthouse, public reaction was divided. Some people expressed sympathy, calling for stricter controls on sensitive evidence. Others fed the problem, seeking out the photos as if they were part of a twisted puzzle to be solved. The fascination with true crime had crossed into dangerous territory, where human suffering was consumed like a form of entertainment. News outlets debated the ethics of reporting on the leaks, some choosing restraint, while others fanned the flames with sensational headlines. Each article only added fuel to the spreading fire, making the family's legal fight feel more urgent with every passing day. By the end of those early hearings, the lawsuits had grown into something larger than anyone expected. It was no longer just about one case or one set of photos. The families were making a stand against a culture that blurred the line between justice and spectacle. They wanted their children remembered for their lives, not for the disturbing images left behind in death. As the lawsuits gained momentum, investigators turned their attention to the origin of the leaked photographs. The official chain of custody for the evidence was supposed to be airtight. Every image taken at the scene had been logged, stored, and secured within law enforcement databases. Yet the photos appearing online contained details never shown in public reports. This created a troubling realization. Either someone with access had deliberately broken protocol, or an outside source had managed to infiltrate the evidence files. Forensic analysts began comparing the leaked images with the originals, noting subtle differences in angles and lighting. These discrepancies suggested that not all of the photos were official police evidence. Some appeared to have been taken by an unknown individual inside the house after the murders, but before the property was fully secured. That possibility chilled everyone involved. If true, it meant the crime scene had been compromised, and someone had entered the house illegally to capture their own set of images. The idea of an intruder walking through the blood-stained rooms after the victims were discovered was almost as horrifying as the murders themselves. Law enforcement officials refused to comment publicly on the matter, but whispers began to circulate that a secondary investigation was underway. Detectives feared that the leaks were not just a matter of unethical behavior, but part of a deliberate attempt to profit from tragedy. The families, already fighting in court, now had to process the thought that strangers had walked through the same rooms where their children had died. This discovery reignited their anger and sorrow. It also deepened their determination to find out who had allowed such a violation to happen. Each new photo appearing online became a reminder that someone, somewhere, had chosen to exploit the most private and devastating moments of their lives. At the same time, online communities grew increasingly obsessed with the images. Amateur sleuths dissected every pixel, convinced the photos contained hidden clues that might solve unanswered questions about the case. Their speculation only added to the chaos, muddying the waters of the investigation and spreading misinformation at a rapid pace. What began as curiosity had transformed into a spectacle where truth and rumor blended together. The question hanging over the case was no longer just about Bryan Kohberger's guilt. It was about who had breached the crime scene, how they had done it, and why they were so determined to share their disturbing collection with the world. When investigators traced the trail of the leaked images, what they uncovered was even more unsettling than expected. Some of the accounts responsible for uploading the photographs were linked to users outside of the United States, far from Idaho and the small town where the murders had taken place. This discovery shifted the investigation into international territory. It appeared that the photos were no longer just circulating among curious onlookers, but had entered a much larger underground market. These disturbing images were being traded and sold across platforms that specialized in trafficking sensitive or graphic material. For the families, this realization was devastating. What had begun as a local tragedy had spiraled into something uncontrollable, reaching people they would never know, in countries they would never visit. The court battles grew more urgent as a result. Lawyers pressed judges to issue immediate orders blocking the release of additional evidence, but legal experts warned of the limits of such measures. Once material finds its way online, erasing it completely is nearly impossible. Every time a platform removed the photos, another upload would appear somewhere else. It became like chasing shadows. The family's attorneys argued that the courts needed to set a precedent, showing that the dignity of victims must be protected at all costs, no matter the technological challenges. Prosecutors supported this stance, recognizing that failure to control the spread could weaken the case against Kohberger by distracting from the trial itself. Meanwhile, investigators quietly explored the possibility that the images had been deliberately sold. If that was true, it meant someone had chosen profit over respect for the dead. Digital forensics experts tried to follow the money, tracking transactions and encrypted communications, but the trail often ended on servers located in jurisdictions unwilling to cooperate. The frustration among law enforcement grew, as each lead seemed to dissolve before it could be acted upon. Outside the legal and investigative circles, the public fascination with the case only intensified. True crime podcasts, YouTube channels, and blogs debated the implications of the leaks. Some questioned whether the photos revealed failures in police security. Others speculated about conspiracy, suggesting that the leaks were intended to sabotage the trial. In reality, No one knew for certain who had set the photographs loose into the world. What was clear was that the family's grief had been transformed into an endless battle against both human cruelty and the unstoppable permanence of the internet. As the trial drew closer, the shadow of the leaked photos loomed larger than ever. For the families, attending hearings was already an emotional ordeal. But now each court appearance carried the added weight of wondering if another batch of images would surface online. Their attorneys warned them not to search for their loved ones' names on the internet, knowing what they might find. But avoiding the leaks proved impossible. Social media feeds and online forums continued to recycle the disturbing content, ensuring the victims' final moments remained exposed. Each new discovery was like reopening a wound that had never healed. The defense team, aware of the chaos surrounding the leaks, seized on the situation. They suggested that the spread of sensitive evidence raised serious questions about the investigation's integrity. If the chain of custody could be broken in one area, how could jurors trust that other pieces of evidence hadn't been compromised? This argument planted doubt in the minds of some observers, turning the family's fight for privacy into an unexpected advantage for the accused. Prosecutors pushed back, insisting that the core evidence tying Kohberger to the murders remained intact, but the damage to public perception was already done. Meanwhile, investigators struggled to untangle the web of leaks. Every digital trail they followed seemed to end in a dead end, and theories about the original source only multiplied. Some believed the photographs were taken by an opportunist who had gained access to the house during the chaotic early hours after the crime was discovered. Others suspected a corrupted insider, someone within law enforcement or forensic services who had violated their oath. Still others believed hackers had managed to infiltrate secured systems. The truth remained hidden, fueling even more speculation and mistrust. For the families, the pursuit of justice began to feel endless. Winning a conviction against Kohberger would never bring their children back, but they hoped it might give them a measure of closure. Yet the constant resurfacing of the images denied them peace. The tragedy was not frozen in the past, it kept resurfacing in headlines, in videos, and in the darkest corners of the internet. In their lawsuits, the families made clear that they were not only fighting for themselves but also for others who might one day face the same nightmare. The murders had stolen their loved ones, but the world's fascination with cruelty threatened to erase their dignity. The question that lingered long after the hearings ended was not only who had committed the murders, but who had kept the pain alive.